This is Jim Palmieri from Agitator Technologies. Welcome to the webinar on cybersecurity for small and mid-sized businesses. We're running this in conjunction with the National Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So welcome everyone. Just some logistics. If you have questions, there's a question bar in the panel. You can put your questions in there and we will answer them at the end. I'd like to introduce Taddy Mladenov. Taddy's CTO of Agitator Technologies. Taddy?
Hi, Jim, and thank you very much. Welcome everybody to our webinar, and thank you for spending some time with us to learn a little bit more about the small and medium-sized business cybersecurity. As Jim mentioned, we are actually doing this with conjunction with the Cybersecurity Month, and we also are doing this in partnership with the Cloud Talk Meetup community here in Bellevue, Washington. If there are questions, please type those questions in the chat window, and we'll answer those questions at the end of the webinar. So let's start. The thing I would like to start with first are a bit of numbers. I actually guess you see all these logos on the screen, Yahoo, Adobe, Target, Dropbox, and so on. And maybe you are already guessing what is the relationship between all these companies. If you guess that they all have been hacked in the past, yes, that's the right answer. But maybe one of the more important questions is what was the amount of data that actually leaked from those companies? So if you look at the numbers, like Target, for example, in 2013, they got actually hacked and 70 million customer records got out and of the company. Among those 70 million customer records, which include first name, last name, address eventually for their marketing campaign, there were about 40 million credit cards. So in 2013, honestly, I was getting a new credit card from my bank every other week just because either Target or Home Depot or PF Chang's or somebody else got hacked. Equifax, for example, is much more serious though. Equifax, the hack happened about a couple of weeks ago, and about 140 million US citizens or people living in the US, their information got hacked. And the problem with Equifax is that not only personally identifiable information like first name, last name, address or phone number got leaked, but also social security number. This is something that you cannot change, and it's always going on with you. The problem with Equifax is, well, in the Target case, I can go and replace my credit card with my bank and I get a new number. I cannot actually go and replace my social security number. So if somebody wants to use my social security number next year or in 5 years or in 10 years to do something malicious, that can be a really big problem. Well, why those numbers are bad? So the first thing, so look at the amount. Actually, Yahoo, I am pretty wrong with the number. Last week it came out that it's not 1 billion, it's all 3 billion accounts in Yahoo that actually got leaked. So if you think like 3 billions here, 100 millions here, another 100 millions there, what the hackers are getting, they're getting an enormous amount of data that they can use for their purpose. What the hackers actually do with that data? If you go, for example, on a website that is called Have I Been Pwned, and this is perfectly legit actually a website owned by a security researcher, Troy Hunt, you will go and find a lot of information that has been already leaked. Why Troy Hunt, the researcher owning the Have I Been Pwned website, does that? So the first thing is it's awareness. If you look at the numbers, 233 website breaches, 4.7 billion accounts, And those accounts include email addresses, they include maybe usernames, they include other information. Among that is about 320 million passwords. So couple of notes around that. So the more people know about their information is exposed, the more people will take action to protect themselves. Now that I know that, for example, my social security number got leaked by Equifax, I went there and not to Equifax, but I made sure that I get notified if somebody gets actually request on my credit report, or I even am considering locking my credit report because I don't need to take any credit cards or any other credits right now. So those are things that actually, in general, when people get awareness about something, they are willing to do an action. If people don't actually get awareness, they are very often willing not to do anything about their security. Coming back to kind of the amount of data that hackers are actually getting, billions and billions of accounts they are getting, and from different kind of companies. Think if you put yourself in the hacker's shoes, you can start thinking of, okay, what can I do with about 3 or 4 or 5 billion accounts? One of the things I can do is I can go and figure out if a particular person has accounts in a different websites. Take, for example, Adobe, Yahoo, and LinkedIn. If the same person has account on any one of those websites, I can go and look what kind of password patterns they use. Then I can start guessing, okay, maybe I can use some social engineering or something else, and I can figure out eventually their bank, and I can go and try hacking their bank account. So the things become serious the more passwords actually they get, or the more data they get. They can also not only guess your password if you use, for example, the same password on any of those, or on all of those sites, but they can guess the patterns that you're using. So I had a colleague in the past who was actually every 72 days when we needed to change our corporate password, what he was doing is he was taking his previous password and rotating the characters by putting the characters that are at the end at the beginning. So he was taking 3 or 4 characters from the end, putting them on the front, and because the policies were not very secure, he was able to get around this. But if a hacker has actually all this data and he understands that he does this thing, it will be very easy for the hacker to go and guess his password. Well, let's put a little bit more numbers in front of you and see why, for example, other hacks are happening. I guess you have seen this screen, hopefully not on your own machine, but at least in the news. And this is the screen from the so-called WannaCry ransomware. So WannaCry ransomware affected about 150 countries. And depending on which statistics you read, between 200,000 or 400,000 machines. And it has very little ransom, about $300. But let's think about the companies that were impacted. So Renault in France, Deutsche Bahn in Germany, Petrobras, FedEx, Nissan, Hitachi, and Russian Central Bank. Not small companies, but there were also a lot of small and medium-sized businesses. For example, one of the most prominent one, and it was relatively big also for our understanding, but it was the National Health Services in UK. About 48 hospitals were closed because major systems were impacted by the WannaCry ransomware. What was happening, like emergency services and x-rays needed to be canceled just because the personnel in the hospitals was not able to use their machines. It took them a couple of weeks to restore all the services and to restore the IT infrastructure in order to support those hospitals. But you can imagine what was the impact actually on the hospital chain with this ransomware. And the other thing is that the ransomware didn't actually target a particular country or particular company. So it spread very fast across Western Europe, Russia, China, Brazil, and India. Those were the main countries that were targeted. There were also targets in US. But the spread of this ransomware was so fast that very few companies were able to react and prevent it. The question comes is, why did WannaCry happen? So there are a couple of reasons. One is the use of old operating system. So majority of the companies that got hacked, they either used a very, very old operating system. For example, 90% of the NHS facilities used Windows XP, although it is 16 years old and not supported by Microsoft anymore. The other thing was that they used outdated OS. So they may have had like Windows 7 or Windows 8 or Windows 10, but they didn't patch their system. For example, the issue that actually enabled WannaCry as a ransomware was discovered 3 months or exactly 91 days before the attack. And the fix from Microsoft was available 59 days or almost 2 months before the attack. What that means is that nobody actually bothered to patch their machines in order to prevent that. So why did that happen? Is because of bad IT security practices. Of course, the attack was stopped by a UK researcher, and it was immediately followed by another ransomware attack called NotPetya that impacted companies like global shipping enterprise Merck, glass manufacturer Saint-Gobain, and others. The shipping company Merck reported $300 million loss just from the NotPetya attack. So you can see what is the scale of those attacks and also the losses that the companies are taking. The very interesting part about those ransomware attacks are that the attacks were performed by relatively inexperienced hackers. So if you read the news, for example, with WannaCry, the attack, they were actually very amateurish how they performed the attack, but at least if you look at the numbers at the end, they were able to get about $130,000, which is a pretty good salary for a hacker in, let's say, Eastern Europe. Okay, so I think we should be done with the numbers. I guess you already know those, or you got the big picture. Now, let's think why those hackers want to target small and medium-sized businesses. So the first thing is, in contrast to the larger enterprises, SMBs cannot afford a dedicated team that deals with security. As you saw from the statistics, even the large enterprises are having problems dealing with this. Yet what about small guys? The second problem is that small and medium-sized businesses have untrained employees, which makes them a really easier target. If your office assistant is not trained how to use multi-factor authentication and relies on a simple 8-character password, which may be their dog's name or something like this, or the birthday of their kid, it will be much easier to impersonate him or her. Small companies can also afford a few $100s for a ransom. So $300, as you can solve for WannaCry, it's money that actually every business will pay to get their data back. It's not so much, but if you think about 400,000 machines, and if we are using our marketing, for example, statistics, let's say 4% of those are willing to pay, so 400,000, 4%, we get about 16,000 payers. Each one pays $300. That's a pretty good amount for the hackers. And keep in mind, the hackers are actually looking for a very easy targets and also the easiest way to get money. But the most important part is that the small and medium-sized businesses can be entry to the much bigger enterprises or the governments. Think about the following scenario. Your company is a supplier for a big enterprise. They infiltrate your network and are able to install malware on your employees' machines. This malware can be anything from keylogger that records everything that you type on the keyboard to ransomware time bomb. Your employees go to the enterprise premises and connect to their network. Voila, the hackers are in. Easy hackable infrastructure is always useful for the hacker. They can just sit around and monitor your communication until something useful comes out, or they can use your IT infrastructure to spread malware on mine bitcoins, or to serve malicious advertisement to other internet users. There are a lot of ways they can use you without you even knowing. Who are those cyber criminals? So there are three types of cyber criminals. The first one is a hacktivist. And hacktivists are people who support certain political movement or share certain political views. They can vary from hackers supporting Greenpeace to others supporting terrorist organizations like the Islamic State. Depending on the industry your business is, you may or may not be target of hacktivists. For example, manufacturing may become a target of hackers supporting the environment, but every website may be a target of an organization like Islamic State, whose only goal is to spread their message. A couple of weeks or maybe a few months ago, even one of the government sites was hacked by like terrorist organization, and some of their messages was put there. The next type is just state-sponsored hackers. Those are hackers that are sponsored by particular nation's government to attack another nation. You can imagine that each bigger government like US, Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, and many more sponsor attacks against each other. Why should you care? Well, if
Hey, Tati, we lost your audio.
cyber criminal.
He's back. Okay. Good.
Oh.
We lost your audio for a second, Tati.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry about that. The last are the so-called plain cyber criminals. Well, they are not plain. They are well-educated individuals or organizations who use their knowledge for evil, unfortunately. Those criminals, they are mostly driven by financial goals and realizing gains with little effort. So SMBs are really the ideal target for them because the effort to actually hack SMB organization is minimal. Once again, I told you, WannaCry, they realized about 130,000 gains, which is a salary for 5 or 6 years for a software engineer in Eastern Europe, if the attack came from there. Let's talk about the types of cyber attacks, and particularly I'll talk about which ones are more targeted to the small businesses. We already spoke about ransomware. I guess it's pretty clear why small businesses can be a good target for ransomware. Easy to hack. They can pay small amounts of ransom, and it's relatively actually profitable for hackers. The next one is the so-called phishing or spear phishing attacks. The goal here is to make the user click on a link to a malicious website where they can steal the credentials. Whether that will be like every user in the company, which is the standard or the normal phishing attack, or whether it will be the high-profile user, like, for example, the CIO, CEO, CFO. Those are called the spear phishing because they are really targeted to a high-profile users. The next one is the so-called business email compromise. According to FBI, business email compromise is about $5 billion industry. 85% of the enterprises are targeted by this type of attack. What this attack actually is very often in, let's say, mid or small-sized enterprises, the CFO receives an email from the CEO to make a bank transfer to a new vendor. That actually happened to my wife about 6 months ago. She was a controller of a small company, about 200 people company with about $30 million revenue. She got an email that looked exactly like the email from her CEO, that she needs to actually transfer $30,000 or $40,000 to some new vendor. And because she was not aware, she actually sent the email back, and she got, of course, a reply, yes, that's a new vendor. Then she discovered actually down in the thread that this email is just a little bit different from her boss's email. Then it occurred to her that this is actually not a valid email. But you can imagine that what that means is that they have a way to monitor the communication. They know how the CEO communicates with their employees, which means that they already have some sniffing tools implanted in the network. The next one is crypto mining. Well, this one is actually really interesting because except the impact that you are paying for somebody else's cryptocurrency mining, there is no other impact to, let's say, other users. But what happens in this particular case is software gets installed on your servers, and the CPU cycles and the memory cycles, instead of serving your needs, they serve the hacker's needs. Adware is another one. For example, this is an attack that targets mostly websites, especially websites that serve other advertisements. So it is relatively easy to replace the advertisement feeds. And if your website is not well protected, and we'll talk about this a little bit later in our webinar, it is possible that actually hackers just, or your website serves advertisement that profits the hackers and not your business. The last one are the so-called distributed denial of service attacks. And most of the times, SMBs are not often targeted by such type of attacks. Such type of attacks, they target bigger companies because they can disrupt the infrastructure. But one interesting thing is that small businesses very often are part, actually, of the attack by providing resources to the hackers to perform the attack. If you've heard lately, IoT, for example, is very often used to spread such type of attacks. If you are in the manufacturing sector, you should be paying attention to that. Now let's talk, how can we protect? We believe that there are three areas that actually we can immediately start looking at in order to protect every company from cyber attacks. The first part is your employees. You need to make sure that employees are well educated and follow best practices for digital security. We'll talk briefly about that. The next part is you need to make sure that the internal communication between your employees as well as the external one between your company and your vendors and customers is secure and does not actually get exposed and misused. Protecting your email is essential to protecting your communication. Last, of course, is you need to make sure that your physical and IT infrastructure is also protected. We, as a technology company, we start from your digital front door, which is your website. You don't want to leave your front door open. Of course, you don't want to leave your website unprotected. In the next few slides, I will give you a few bullet points to use as a checklist in each of those areas. Let's start with the employees. So training your employees to follow good security practices is at the core of keeping your company protected from cyber attacks. The use of password managers, like, for example, LastPass, and the use of strong passwords and password expiration are mandatory for good security. Clicking on email links also is something that you need to make sure your employees are aware of. Interesting statistic is that although, like, everybody knows, so I should not click on a link that comes in my email, especially if I don't know the email. 75 or 76% admit of doing those because, like, the link is there, why not clicking on it? Visiting not legit websites, not every Google search is good to click on. There are ways to help your employees with those. Enforce strong password policies like minimum length, minimum number of lower or uppercase characters, number of special characters. You just need to go and update your password policies. Make sure that also they are asked to change their password regularly, 45, 60, or 72 days at maximum. Later on, we'll talk a little bit more about email protection and how to avoid receiving malicious emails, but as a minimum, you can create policies that provide visual clues for emails that come from trusted sources. For example, one thing that we do in our company is we have a whitelist of our vendors and customers, and if the email comes from emails from those vendors and customers, we tag them as a vendor or customer. Any other email comes as external, and we can even increase the security and just put a rule to say, okay, we will quarantine every email that is not from a vendor or customer. There is an automated way to go and do that. We'll talk a little bit later. And of course, visiting illegit websites can be prevented by using like DNS servers that keep track of malicious websites and do not point your browser to them. One more thing, websites with HTTPS, that actually becomes mandatory. Even Google, with their new release of Google Chrome, they will start flagging websites that don't support HTTPS. Not only that, but in their search results, they will put a marker next to the non-secure or non-HTTPS sites saying, oh, this is not secure site, and that may impact your search engine ranking. Let's go to workstation and laptop protection. Well, the first thing is encrypt the hard drives. Well, the first thing I do when I actually get a new laptop is I go and turn on encryption. What that means is if somebody steals my laptop, they cannot pull out the hard drive connected to another machine and read the data. Well, I lose the laptop, but at least my data is protected. Excuse me. Software actually for drive encryption is already included in the operating system, so you can use BitLocker on Windows or FileVault on macOS, depending on which OS you are using, and both of them encrypt the drive with a special random key that only you know. This is one-time thing that you need to do. You don't need to actually do it every time when you log into your machine, but my recommendation is if you have a new machine, just go and do it immediately. And after that, it just works. The next thing you can do is you can install some antivirus or anti-malware, anti-ransomware. I don't know how many new names do they have for those. Software on the machine, which provides additional protection if by mistake, for example, somebody goes and clicks on a link, downloads executable, this software has a good chance to stop it. It's not bulletproof. There are breaks in those software, but at least it's another level of protection that you can provide to your employees. One of the things that a lot of companies fail with is protecting their data and backing up their data. So everybody carries their computer. It's similar with our phones. So we carry our phones and we think, okay, they are very solid devices. The phone falls, the computer falls, breaks, and I lose everything that's actually on this computer. If I never backed up the data, I cannot get it back, or I need to pay a lot of money to get it back. But not only that, so file and folder backup will help you if your company gets actually attacked with ransomware. What the ransomware actually does, they encrypt your drive, and you are not able to actually get the data because you don't have the key to decrypt it. They can use the same technology, and actually WannaCry and NotPetya, they use the Windows technology for BitLocker to encrypt the drive. They just didn't, actually you didn't have the key. But if you have backup, so you can go format the drive, pull the backup from your backup location, and continue working without paying any ransom. Backup is very important. We have seen very few companies doing a backup right, because most of the people, they say, oh, I have a backup, or they rely on manual backups. They forget to do it. They don't do it regularly. There are ways that you can actually put an agent on your machine or every one of your employees' machines and back up their data automatically every day. So the most that you will lose is whatever changed in the last day. You can do, of course, much more often backups. Well, last one, of course, make sure that your employees update their machines regularly. What does regularly mean? So they're the so-called zero-day patches that you need to do immediately, because if that actually gets discovered by the hackers, they can hack you immediately. But they are also the regular patches that companies like Microsoft or Adobe put out, and there is a name even for that. It's called Patch Tuesday, the second Tuesday of the month, as far as I remember. New updates are coming. So make sure that at least once a month your employees are updating their machines. Now, email protection. What can we do about email protection? Let me give you one example. This email looks very likely like coming from Bank of America. Maybe the credit card number is not the right, but honestly, I don't remember the last 4 digits of my credit card. But they have my address or this person's address. They have the Bank of America logo. They have everything that actually is, looks very legit. And there is a link to activate your new credit card, and maybe I have requested a new credit card. The only thing is, if I don't look carefully, and if you see here, the name or the URL is a little bit misspelled. So it's not Bank of America, it's Bank of America. It's just missing a number. So if I click there and if I type my username and password, that will get to some hacker server, not to Bank of America. And this is how phishing works. If you don't read carefully, then and you click on the link, you maybe actually your credentials may be stored. But there are ways to prevent this email even coming into your or your employee's inbox. So in the email protection, as we mentioned, there is the basic protection, which is strong email passwords, and one additional thing is multi-factor authentication. How does multi-factor authentication work is, except actually typing your username and password when you try to log in for your email, you get either a notification on your phone, or you use a multi-factor authentication app that gives you a special code that you need to type. So nobody else except the person who knows the username, the password, and carries this third-party authentication phone can log into this account. So this is the basic protection that you must actually turn on for your employees. So if you use Office 365 or Gmail, both they support actually strong passwords and multi-factor authentication. Make sure that you turn this as a policy for your employees. But there is also advanced protection. One thing, and I already mentioned that, is email rules. So whitelist all the companies that you do business with. And honestly, that's not a guarantee that you will not receive a phishing email from any one of their domains. Yeah. But at least it's a one step. Make a visual clues in your employees' inboxes saying, okay, this is email that you can trust, or you can trust 90%. And this is email that you cannot trust because it comes from Hotmail, Gmail, Outlook.com, or something like this. The next thing you can do is you can actually get your email records straight. So one of the things that I said is, in order to prevent such phishing attacks, the industry is getting new technologies that actually prevent those things. It started with the so-called SPF records, then it went to the DKIM, and now the latest one is the DMARC records. What the DMARC does is you can, if you put the records right, You can monitor your email traffic for a certain amount of time. Then the next step that you do is you collect enough information to actually be able to say, now I would like to snapshot this and all the emails that I have received so far. Some of them, they are actually legit emails and consider these emails as legit for the future. But any other emails that are coming and that are not from this subset that I already collected, either quarantine them or reject them as emails. So you can vary the policies. What we do is we monitor normally the communication. When we turn on those records, we monitor the communication for about a month. Then we actually increase the level and say, okay, now start quarantining these new messages. Then we review them for another 2 or 3 months. And at the end, we say, okay, now we created the policy. The DMARC record actually works pretty well. We will start rejecting any other emails. What that gives us is not only that actually we protect our email, but we also protect our customers and our vendors because when the DMARC records are set properly for each company, there is a good chance that nobody can spoof our email and send email to our vendors or customers from our name. And this is what those records do. Of course, the last, or not the last, but the more advanced option is that you can use email firewall that actually captures your email even before coming to your email server, and there's some additional rules. So they are either hardware devices or software email firewalls that you can use and configure with much more complex rules. Let's move to the website protection. I want to show you a picture, and this is a tool that actually was developed by Mozilla. And once again, its goal is to increase the awareness of the security of the website. And this is the real results of bankofamerica.com. So they are failing. They got F when you go and actually check their website. And there is a relatively good report below telling you why they are failing. So if you look, the website has about 11 tests that performs, and those tests are targeting things like cross-site scripting, like referrer policies, cookies, content security policies, and so on. HTTPS also. If you see, they are failing on majority of that. What that means is that the developers who developed this website, they didn't pay any attention to the security requirements for actually implementing a secure website. Mozilla has a security guidelines that you can go and review. Some of those things are relatively easy to implement, and of course that requires some implementation effort. So we help companies do that. Some are a little bit more complex, but what do they help you with is they actually help you secure your front door or digital front door. Let's talk about website protection. So the basic protection that you can do is you can turn on HTTPS. As I mentioned, this will become a requirement for you if you want actually to have good search engine optimization, if you want Chrome not to actually flag your website as insecure and so on. Secure passwords. I don't know how many times I need to mention that one. So it's everywhere. The hack that happened in Equifax, it turns out that one employee just put a very unsecure password on one of the servers, and that's what happened. So they got access to that server, and from there, everything was relatively easy. Keep up to date, again, repeating that, but make sure, so you don't need to update only your employees' laptops, you need to update also your servers, whether that will be the operating system that you're running on the servers or the framework that actually is used for your website, you need to update it. 28%, 26 or 28% of the websites in the world are actually running WordPress. And many of those actually are not updated for a long time. So if you are one of those people who is or companies that is using WordPress, make sure that WordPress is updated also, not only the operating system underneath. Advanced protection is implementing, of course, the Mozilla security guidelines. So the Mozilla security guidelines, what they will help you to do is like nobody will be able, for example, to serve third-party content that you do not approve on your website. As I mentioned previously, this adware that actually is popping up on your website, that will be prevented. Or nobody will be able to actually frame your site and put it in a frame or serve some frames from another party. Nobody will be able to do cross-site scripting on your site in order to steal credentials and so on. So this is what those security guidelines actually help you with. And of course, the last is you can add additional firewalls, you can add additional DDoS protection, and so on. So that's more advanced options. So what to do if you get breached? We are all actually vulnerable to breaches. So I know that all these guidelines that we're providing, but don't think that the hackers are just sleeping there and they use the same old techniques. They are also developing new techniques to get you. It's a constant battle between security experts and hackers to really either protect or hack the companies. I think Equifax is a very good example what not to do. Equifax or Deloitte or the recent one is Accenture. So if you get breached, the first thing is like assess the situation. So figure out what's going on, what exactly the hack is, how did it get in. If you are not able to do that, or if your IT personnel is not experienced enough, get experts to do that. The other thing you need to do is make sure you prevent further spread. The simplest thing is, for example, if you know that one of your machines gets ransomware, just can disconnect this machine from the network. Just pull out the cable. It's that simple. If, for example, data got leaked, and let's say from one of your databases, let's say you have a customer database and that got leaked, just make sure you disconnect the rest of the databases. Of course, that will impact your business. You may not be able to do business for a day or two, but make sure that if they got in one database, they may be actually up to getting into the other one. Notify your vendors and customers. So be transparent to them. Hiding information from them, first, is bad for your image, as we saw with Equifax or Deloitte. But second is like maybe the hack came from there. So if the hack or one of your vendors or one of your customers was used to actually exploit some vulnerabilities on their side, and they got into your company, it's better if they know that and they start investigating what's happening. And of course, involve security professionals. We know that small and medium-sized businesses, they don't have enough expertise to do that. So the advice is, and you don't need to call us, but make sure that you call somebody who knows security, who can go and do forensics and figure out how they got in. He or she can do like penetration testing and test your infrastructure to make sure that your infrastructure is secure. So that was all from me. One of the things that actually I want to offer to everybody on this webinar is we can provide a free preliminary security report, which includes all the steps that we mentioned in this particular webinar. If you go to bit.ly/SMB security assessment and request this, we will actually send you a full report about your email records, about your website records, so everything that we are able to actually test from outside without getting involved in your particular infrastructure. But what we do as part of the security assessment is, as I said, so we test your email records and we tell you whether there is a chance that somebody can, for example, spoof your email and spread phishing emails, or somebody who can actually send you phishing emails from outside. And we also test your website. We test it according to the Mozilla security guidelines, as well as we test versions of the software your website is running. We give you some information where it is located, if you need, for example, disaster recovery for your site or load balancing. So that's all, and I'll be happy to take any questions. So let's take a look if there are any questions.
Okay, so type your questions in the questions bar, and we have a couple, just a couple comments too. So Bryce Matasuka from Above Cloud, he made two comments. One is just a reminder, people, when you talked about WannaCry and a couple of the issues with not patching or updating machines, some people are using illegal licensed software. Like some of those machines were illegally licensed Windows machines, and they couldn't be patched. And then the other thing too is just a reminder, build an incident response plan so that you can execute quickly on, if something happens, you can execute on that plan. Okay, what else?
Yeah, I see. So there are quite a few comments from Bryce. So there is also, correctly, business risks that we are not taking into account, and we actually plan a complete full webinar with a legal person that actually will where we will talk about all these business risks and also what is the legal liabilities after that if you get breached, if you don't respond properly, having an incident response plan, how to go through that. We are actually clear that, for example, small and mid-sized enterprises, they may not have that, but even basic plan is required if something happens. So as I said, we are planning a separate webinar where we'll have a legal counsel to actually talk about, once again, business risks and liabilities after that. There is also a comment about insurance, cyber insurance plans. Yes, that's correct. So one is the cyber insurance is also one thing that you must have. The cyber insurance lately is actually picking up as a popularity. The thing is that a lot of companies do not realize that, for example, if they don't actually secure their infrastructure, their cyber insurance may be higher. So we work with a couple of cyber insurance companies that actually they ask us to go and evaluate this infrastructure or the customer's infrastructure and give them some assessment to say, okay, are they secure? What is their level of security? So they can actually define the right premiums for that. So be aware that so buying the cyber insurance, there are ways to actually lower the insurance and get a higher coverage if you make sure that your infrastructure is secure. So any additional questions?
No, I think that's it, Toddy.
Okay, then if there are no other questions, or if you're interested to get the security report, just go to bit.ly SMB security assessment, or you can go to our website and send us contact if something comes after the webinar or in the future. Just don't hesitate to contact us. Thank you very much, everybody, and enjoy your day.